Welcome to Module 22 of the Paraprofessional Series, Professional Boundaries and Communication as a Paraprofessional. This session was originally presented at the first Para Retreat in the summer of 2024. IU29, in collaboration with school entities, agencies, business and government partnerships, strives to serve the changing needs of education through the delivery of services, improvement of current programs, and implementation of new initiatives. And we're glad that you joined us today. My name is Doreen Milet. I am a Schuylkill Intermediate Unit 29 educational consultant with a focus of secondary transition and brain steps. What you see on the screen is a picture of my multi-generational family. You see me in the center with my son who just graduated from Pitt. At the same 3 days after I became a mom to Brian, I became a grandmother to Kirsten, who was standing in the long blue dress on the far left. Um, my stepdaughters are in their picture, my husband, my sister, a good friend, Chrissy, and some of my grandchildren. Not all of them were present, but any family gathering that we have, any experience that we have includes multi-generations, and we have to learn how to manage those and communicate appropriately and make adjustments as needed and celebrate the differences while also enjoying the similarities. And it's very same for you in the classrooms that you serve. It is not uncommon for a classroom to have at least 3 to 4 to 5 different generations in it. And dealing with all of those and dealing with the parents can be tricky at times. In this session, first of all, we're going to start by defining the generations and understanding what each generation is. We're going to highlight some of the similarities and then some of the differences between the generations, not just two. And then I'm going to give you some strategies to thrive in a multi-generational classroom and tips and strategies to try to avoid conflict and create meaningful opportunities for yourself, to the teachers you serve, and the students you serve. To begin with, I want you to be reminded that you are very valuable to the classroom and a very valuable and essential part of the special education team. Many times the teacher is planning the activities and the lessons, and you are the one sitting right next to the student or in close proximity to the student to make sure that they are following along and getting the best out of their day. No matter what is said in this training or any other training you attend, please make sure that you follow all the school and district communication and relationship policies that exist in that setting. Make sure you maintain appropriate student professional relationships. Make sure you provide positive praise or feedback on assignments or behavior in all school settings, and work collaboratively with the teacher and related service personnel to understand the concepts of the lesson and appropriate adaptations and supports for the student. Generations are generally periods of 20 to 25 years, and those can be fluid depending on research and the ever developing definitions. The time between one generation and the next is actually shrinking because of the rapid and continuous changes in the world and the digital changes that we're experiencing. So the generational periods are becoming defined by the use of technology rather than by historical or social events, which is what used to happen in the past. So just some quick questions for you to think of. This is a little different in a group setting, but watching a video, it's a little different. But just think to yourself if you can respond to these next questions. How many do you remember where you were when JFK was shot? Do you remember life without computers or with push button phones? Do you remember growing up watching Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers? How about Captain Kangaroo? How many have a Facebook page, a blog, a TikTok, Those are just interesting questions for you to ask, and you can actually change those up if you would like to talk more about the students you serve. Some of you are maybe working in a classroom where there's a span of ages, and maybe they wouldn't remember where JFK was shot, but they might be able to remember where they were on 9/11. They might remember a life without an iPad, so you can change these questions to reflect the current situations or experiences that you know the students in your classroom may have experienced. So there's in this presentation and in the research that I found, I am going to talk about these six generations, and this is what we're going to name them. And I would be willing to bet that in any of the classrooms that we are servicing, you have someone possibly from all six that you're exposed to. So we have the silent generation, which is like kind of tradition. That is the word that would be best to describe that generation. That you really focus on tradition and traditions, and that would be if you were born from 1928 to 1945. So you can see that kind of 20 to 25-year span. The next one is the baby boomers, and those are known to be more adaptable. Now, perhaps not every baby boomer is, but in general, that's a characteristic attributed to the baby boomers, that they are adaptable. And those are the individuals born between 1946 and 1964. And then the next one would be Generation X. And those are considered a trait would be that they're latchkey, that they're street smart. And that would be the generation that I'm in from 1965 to 1980. Millennials would be next, and those are the ones that we typically think they worry about fun first and work later. And so, for those of us that came before, sometimes we negatively think about that, but that is what their trait in general would be. And those are individuals born from 1981 to 1996. So, for me, that would be my stepdaughters, so I'm dealing with them and realizing that I am the generation before. Their father is two generations back. So it's just differences. Generation Z would be the trait would be that they're the social natives. And what that means is that they were born at a time when technology was in their face immediately. So they have been social, they've been connected, and they don't know what it's like not to have a device with them. That's just what they've been. They've seen their parents and their other siblings with that, but that's what they're used to. And these would be some of my grandchildren that are born in this time frame, and my own two children are social natives. They don't know a time without connecting and being social. And then the newest one that I learned in preparing this presentation is the Gen Alpha. So they are materially endowed, they're very tech savvy. So these are the youngest of the students that we have that are just used to having all the latest devices, and just disposable things, and not so much the traditions of things, but just moving on and always changing. So those are from 2013 to 2025. So just take a minute, take a second to just think about yourself. Where do you fit? Where do your family members fit? Do those characteristics in the center kind of match? And think of the students in the classrooms, and where are most of them? Are you working with mostly social natives? Are you working with mostly the Gen Alphas? And just being aware of these different generations and the fact that we coexist in our personal lives and our professional lives, and how to work appropriately and communicate effectively with all of those at any given time. Now, I just shared with you the chart of the definitions, and you might have thought, well, hey, I'm not all about that. That's not a trait that's me. But research shows that up to 85% of people do fit their generational characteristic profile. There might be some maybe unique things that you're not all that, or you don't have all of the characteristics. But generally, 85% of people do fit what is known to be a millennial, what is known to be a Gen X, what is known to be a baby boomer. So that is one of the research items that I found. So here's some information about each of the generations. So we talked about them. This is the silent generation. They're shaped by those historical events, the Great Depression, World War II, radio and movies. They're motivated by respect, by being recognized, by having long term value in things. And if you think about it, that's really different from our younger students now. We don't carry things for long term. Every time when you go, you get a new TV, do you get the warranty? No, you expect to buy a new TV in 3 to 5 years. So that long term value is our silent generation. The communication style of most individuals in this generation is that personal touch. They're the ones that are still mailing letters with stamps. They're still making phone calls. They're less likely maybe to text or to Snapchat or to do some type of quicker communication. And we do really appreciate those. And even though I'm not the silent generation, I do really love still sending a card and writing a letter. I'm actually a pen pal with some students in a local school. So it's a skill and it's something that when this behavior stops, it's going to be sad, I think, to not have that. And they have a very worldview of things. Their worldview is they appreciate obedience. Okay, so sit down, listen, respect your elders. That there's a hierarchy and a seniority to things. So that obedience. If you think about wedding vows, the honor and obey, and many times now the obey word is not really used in some wedding ceremonies anymore. So it's just a change in thinking. Baby boomers are that 1946 to 1964. And again, they're hardworking, they're motivated, they want to be productive. Sometimes they can be considered selfish, unloyal, or an egoist. So those are just some of the qualities attributed to the baby boomers. And if I think my husband is one, and yes, he matches kind of those, although he is very loyal. The Gen X is the one that I'm kind of finding I'm in. Um, and there is a little data piece there that by 2028, which is coming faster than I realize, Gen X is going to outnumber the baby boomers. So the silent generation and the baby boomers are going to get smaller and smaller. And the Gen X is going to be the outnumbered of there. And Gen Xers are known to be flexible, informal. So some of that obey and professionalism and tradition is not as important, and a little bit more informal, very independent and a little bit skeptical. We're kind of like not, don't always believe everything we hear. We need to see it. So if you think about maybe yourself, maybe you're Gen X, maybe you work with a teacher who's Gen X and you're a different generation. But those are some of the traits that 85% of us labeled in there would have. Then go to the millennials from 1981 to 1996. And the things that they are known to value are like monetary rewards. They want money out of it, the stock options. They might be paying attention to the stock. They might be more aware of that. They're also digital natives, which means that they haven't really known a time that they didn't have a device. Um, I remember a childhood when I didn't carry a phone. As a matter of fact, when I met my husband back in 1990, he had the bag phone, which I thought was kind of funny. So I remember a time when we didn't carry a phone. Now I'm conditioned to use it, and I do. Like if I leave my house and I don't have my phone, I actually turn around and go back for it because it is a usable device that I use, and I use it for many different uh, behaviors throughout the day. The millennials also they do value feedback. So they are looking for that. Maybe they do like the monetary reward, but they also like the non-monetary rewards. They want constructive feedback. So if you're working with students that are born as millennials or individuals, or you're working with a teacher that's a millennial, you have to consider those values and maybe try to incorporate those in your relationship. Just something funny, generational jokes, but for every broke or unemployed millennial, there is a boomer earning six figures that can't open a PDF. So how many of you you rely on someone from a younger generation to help you do some of those things on those devices that we aren't familiar? I'll use my husband again. He's getting into his phone and he's looking at email, but he opens things and then doesn't know what to do with them. He ends up getting advertisements that he doesn't want. So he knows enough to be dangerous, but he needs usually my help or one of our sons' help to get himself out of some things he gets into. So back to our generations, and we have Gen Z. So this is probably quite a few of the students that you're working with. These are individuals born between 1997 and 2012. And this generation has been shaped. And if you notice, like I said earlier, if you notice, the time frame has shortened. It's no longer, it's 1997 to 2012. It's no longer 20 to 25 years, because what's happening is there's so much changing with our technologies and with other things that the generations are not lasting as long. So Gen Z is shaped by life after 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, that really changed the trajectory of what how many of us act and what our world is doing. We had the Great Recession. And again, these are students that are digital natives. They don't know a time that a parent or themselves did not have some type of device. Many times parents are holding off as long as they can to get the cell phone. But I see when you go out to restaurants, you see little children in high chairs with the cell phone propped up or an iPad propped up. My 2-year-old grandson, he when he gets fidgety, and it's really a place that you need him to be quiet, a cell phone is put in front of him to appease that. And I'm not making a judgment on that at all. That's between the parent and the child. But that's what they're used to. This generation, Gen Z, is motivated by diversity. Like they don't want all the same. They like things to be personalized and they like to be an individual. So that might be a direct confrontation to those more traditional values and conformity. They might not want to conform, and sometimes they are ill judged for that, but that's actually just a generational trait. And then Gen Z is, I have further Gen Z information, because since that is the one that we are probably dealing with most in our classrooms at this point. They have a more of a global awareness because they've been seeing things. Now, it's not always accurate what they're looking at, but they do have more awareness of what's going on in the world around us. They are progressive. They might come up with some really cool ideas, out of the box thinking, which leads them into entrepreneurial things where they are taking on totally new businesses. And to us that are older, they appear less focused, because they are doing so many different things at one time. I do that all the time with my sons. They are typically, like watching a game, but on their phone, and then also doing, like text messages. They're constantly going. Their communication style for this generation is mostly instant messages, text messaging, social media. And of course, they don't use the same social media that many of us that are older use. They're doing more of the Instagram, Snapchat, um, the newer social media outlets. So just a little quote that helps us now that we've defined the five of the generations to just kind of think. So each generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it. And that was George Orwell. So just take a second to just let me read that again. Each generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it. So each generation does that to the preceding and the next generation. Just an interesting thought. Now, this newest generation that, again, I was not aware of until I started researching for this presentation is the Gen Alpha. Okay, so those are our little guys. Those are the ones that are born from 2013 essentially through now. And they are, the picture just describes them totally. They got fidgets, they got devices, they have drones, they have all kinds of things that maybe we never imagined, kind of like the Jetsons. If I say the Jetsons, depending on how old you are, you get it. We are living a world where we have Jetsons. My son in his apartment has a vacuum that does it itself, and that was like a Jetson thing. Lots of people can operate their home and their daily housekeeping and things with a device. So they're very mobile. They use mobile devices. They move around a lot. They're very global. They're aware of what's going on in our world. They're very visual. They need to see things. They watch demonstrations on YouTube, TikTok, digital again, and they're very social. So they might not be social face to face, but they could be very social through devices. So those are the Gen Alphas. Those are our younger students that we are working with. So now we're just going to compare them side by side. So you have the silent and you have Gen Z. Okay, so seeing some of their things side by side, this is where we get into the fact that you're in the classroom side by side. And this could be you and the teacher of the classroom. This could be you and the students of the classroom. So when you see those two things side by side, productive, independent, team player, individual, less adaptable, very digital, innovative, we're considered mentors. So if we are trying to teach someone that's more digital and we're less adaptive, it just means we have to figure out a way to effectively recognize each other and respect each other and learn from each other. The silent generation versus Gen Z. There's a difference of 40 years between those two. And we are considered, silent generation is considered organized, focused, and very ethical. The Gen Zs are considered very smart, adaptive, and ambitious, which could conflict sometimes with that silent generation. Baby boomers versus Gen Z. So you have hardworking, motivated, productive, and materialist compared to someone that's independent, individual, digital, and innovative. And again, some of them look very similar. There's similarities across all of these generations. It's not all about differences. So, some similarities that we can expect no matter what generation you're talking about. All generations, we can assume, now, not all individuals, as I said, but you would think about 85% of each of these generations take some pride in their work. Okay. That would be common. That would be a commonality among no matter what generation. They desire to understand what's valuable in their work and understand how their goals correspond to the goals of the organization. So, in the classroom, what this means is they want to know what's valuable about the work they're doing, and they want to understand how the work I'm doing in the classroom matches the goals of the classroom teacher or the school. They don't want to be seen as the weak link. No matter how old or young you are, you don't want to be that person that's left behind, that's obsolete, or inexperienced. So we typically tend to take over the device rather than teach the person how to do something. We want to just grab the device and do it for them. So that's a matter of respecting that we need each other to learn and to continue to grow. Praise, we don't all need praise, but when the praise is given, we all want the praise to mean something. We don't want it to be these just empty comments. Oh, good. No, we want it to mean something. Like, why are you telling me that? Why are you complimenting me? Why are you telling me that I did something well? So make sure the praise that you give has meaning. We all want to get along with others, whether it's face to face or in a digital, like kind of social network, but we all really do have the desire to get along with others. It's very rare for an individual not to have that. We want any decisions that are made to be made fairly with transparency and a purpose. Like, please don't tell me to do something that has no purpose. What's its purpose? What is it going to do for me? How is it going to help me? So I want you to take a second to think about the classroom that you support, the teacher that you work with, and I want you to think about how many generations are in there. Are we talking about two? Are we talking about three? Are we talking about all six? What are we talking about? So take a minute to think about how many generations are in the classroom that you support. Okay. Just an interesting point for you to consider. Now, I explained the differences. We looked at some similarities. Now, these are some strategies that you can use on a daily basis to make sure that there is harmony and cohesiveness in those multi generational spaces, whether it's your house or your classroom. So you can establish respect when, like older generation, we were taught that you just respected everybody. And many of our younger generations aren't that way anymore. You need to show respect essentially to get respect. So establishing that respect, recognizing that individual as an individual and proving to them that you will respect them as much as they respect you so that it's a back and forth. Make sure that you're flexible and accommodating because, as we identified, each generation has different methods or different ways of approaching things. So, if they're not receptive to the way you are familiar, you need to be flexible and accommodating, allowing them to possibly use a method or a technique that works for them. My son he's a civil engineer. He got a degree in civil engineering and he worked with his father. His father's a contractor. His father has done things the way he's done them and he does them very well all his life. But when my son would suggest a different technique to him, my husband has a hard time being flexible and accommodating with that. But it actually would save him some time and energy if he would listen. Try to avoid stereotyping. Remember, we've said it a couple times that yes, there are some common traits or characteristics that you can associate with each of the generations, but don't assume that every individual has each of those traits. So don't think, oh, he's a baby boomer. I can expect this, this, and this. No, try to learn as you're establishing that respect with that individual. Try to learn their specific traits. I've said it a couple times throughout the presentation and in just my son and a husband story, but learn from each other. Um, they like a silly story. The one time I was text messaging, and I'm the generation where yes, I text message, but I type everything out. I'm not a big fan of the emojis or a big fan of abbreviating things. But as I was texting and my son was watching me one time, he said, "Mom, if you hit the space bar twice, it puts a period there." And I was like, "No, did not know that." So it's just a really quick little tip, but it allowed me to still be grammatically correct with my text message. So make sure we learn from each other. You might have a way to teach somebody something that's younger than you or older. Tailor your communication style. So what that means, is if you know, I had to do this with my stepdaughters many years ago when I got the cell phone and we were doing things. If I called them, they wouldn't answer. Okay. And I used to think, oh, they don't answer, they're too busy. But if I would immediately text them right after trying to call them, they would respond immediately to the text. So I had to tailor my communication style. If I wanted something more immediate as a response from them, I would text them as opposed to calling. So tailoring your communication style means that you switch it up to acknowledge the generation that you're working with. And then don't overlook that we are very similar. Remember that slide that I shared with you that we do have very similar things, no matter what generation. So don't overlook those. Identify those and celebrate those. Another funny joke, how to frighten the new generation would be to put them in a room with a rotary phone, an analog watch, and a TV with no remote, and then leave the directions on how to use them in cursive. So just a little funny, and you'd have to be a certain generation to even know who that man is. So you can look up all these generational jokes and quotes. They're fun. So you're in a classroom and the teacher's teaching. So here are some instructional considerations for those baby boomers in your class. They like to discuss things in groups. Typically, remember, I always told you that there are some that these don't fit. They will wait through the material. They don't find practical, hoping for 2 or 3 nuggets. As a professional developer, I have audiences that are many times baby boomers generation. So they don't mind sitting there if I don't give them content that's immediately appropriate or practical for them. They'll wait politely until they learn maybe 2 or 3 good things. Okay, so that's the baby boomer generation. They can sit in one spot for a long time, especially if they just get to talk every once in a while. They appreciate the ground rules that you set and parking lots. Parking lots would be like a place for them to put questions or comments. So they appreciate those things. They like laws, principles, and getting things right. And they believe doing those things, everything will turn out okay. They don't think some things should be talked about. Like some things are not appropriate. For Gen Xers, which is going to become like they're going to phase out the baby boomers, they have to be entertained while they learned. They grew up with things being coming, throwing at them in videos and fast paced. So they like to be entertained while they're learning. They can scan 5 websites in 15 minutes that and find relevant information. So give them what that means instructionally is we can't have them only looking at one resource. We have to give them useful stuff and we have to do it quickly. They question authority. And sometimes they do it disrespectfully. So we have to teach them how to question authority in a respectful manner, which can be done. There are ways. If we don't like the way things are going, we can ask for an appointment with our boss. We can contact our legislators. We can attend the township meeting. We can question, we can fight a citation. So there are correct ways to question authorities. They lose attention if it's boring. Okay. So the clip I have here, and hopefully it will, it's a clip of ennui from the movie Inside Out 2. And I'm not sure if it'll work in this. So that was ennui and just the boredom. So they just lose attention quickly if they're bored with something. They expect to work on their laptop or their device and they pull out other work if a section is not relevant. And they don't mean it to be disrespectful. They just are very quick to move around with content. You have basically 10-minute windows to be relevant and practical. So they're no longer going to sit there and wait for these nuggets. You have to show it to them very quickly. Um, so if you don't do that, then they just delete you. If you don't get them in those, excuse me, in those 10-minute windows, then you are running the risk of being deleted. They are not really a fan of the ground rules or parking lots. Uh, they wonder why you're putting off the hard questions until later. So they might not want to hold their question. They might want to ask their question. They will learn things online or live as long as you're not wasting their time. And they talk about all topics unless they discriminate against people or overgeneralize. So really, they're not afraid to talk about some tough topics. Millennials were entertained at all times. So these are kids that are very used to being entertained, learning everything as they're being entertained. They expect a level of interaction. They don't want to sit and be passive. They trust authorities who appear to get it, but they question, tease, and even banter with the authority. They believe the world is fixable, so they are looking for what works. They don't want to make they don't want to wait to make a contribution. So the suggestion is to be let them make a contribution in your class. They kind of disregard ground rules in parking lots if they get in the way, so you kind of have to be flexible with that. They expect to have fun and get through content quickly. So you can move around a lot, then learn through activities. That's what they've been doing since they're in preschool. You have to have something for them other than a manual or a PowerPoint, and they'll talk about anything. And they don't mind learning online, most of them, if it's interactive and quick. And they can communicate through the visual far more than previous generations. Think about YouTube and TikTok now. For Gen Zers, they use software to increase engagement with content. They usually begin a dialogue. They're very used to multitasking and skimming for the most valuable information. So you can try a variety of teaching methods to keep the class moving. They use visuals to your advantage because they're very in tune to those. Try to hold online office hours. That would be for parents or students, because students are used to immediately reaching people. Like if you're going to get help with something, there's sometimes a live chat feature. So a teacher may not be able to do the live chat, but if there's some way that they can connect, that's realistic. Or if you're not able to do that, then you would set the boundaries to say, I should respond within 24 hours or whatever it would be. And then always have a rationale. Like they want to know why this information is important. And if you can explain it, that's what makes the learning essential. If you don't have an explanation for that, then maybe it's redundant information and you can focus on something that's more essential. And focus on positivity and seek help when needed. So that's what they're trying to do. They do ask for help. Your Gen Alpha, our littlest, our youngest ones, they lean into what they value and support them in exploring. Design assignments that offer opportunities to create something that they can share with a wider audience. They're very curious, so create that space for those questions that they have. Encourage open communication, foster independence and self reliance so that they are learning how to advocate for themselves. We need to keep reminding them the safe use of technology and the appropriate use of technology. Provide opportunities for cultural awareness and social experiences. We have to model kindness and empathy for them. It's sometimes that emotion, those emotions aren't translated through all the social platforms. So we have to model that for them. And then another quote that I found, which kind of gives us hope. So if we're kind and we don't judge and we have respect for others, the world would simply be a better place. So the point is to teach this to each next generation. So rather than us thinking that we're better than or wiser than, let's work on being kind, not judging, and respecting each other, no matter what generations we have in our classroom. So when we were in person, what I asked each person to do is think about something that they learned or something that they already knew, but I reinforced with my content. So you can think about that and jot that down. And what is one thing that you're still curious about, or maybe one way that you might change your interactions and your communication style with the classroom teacher you work with or with the students you work with? Because the goal of every professional development is to uh, celebrate the things that you're doing that you should continue doing, and think about things that you want to learn more about, or something that you'll do to change your practice. And that's what we need to do throughout our life. So again, I thank you for listening to this session. I hope it was enjoyable for you, and I hope you learned something. You have the anticipatory guide to complete to get your credit. And if you have any questions, you are certainly welcome to reach out to me. Again, my name is Doreen, and thank you for listening.